second issue. Some say that the worth of a female in Islam, even if it's not by text, notwithstanding that text, but in reality, in action, she's worth half of man, meaning that her humanity, her dignity, her rights are just equal to half of that of man. You ask them, where do you get that from? They say, from the Quran itself. Because the Quran has a general rule, quote, general rule, that للذكر مثل حظ الأنثيين, for the male, meaning in inheritance. So that the claim is a general rule here, and that translates in reflect on the worth of women versus men. So the first question to ask here, is that true? For the time being, I shock some Muslims even when I give them lectures, and I ask them, do you see anything wrong with that statement? That there is a rule in the Quran that the share of inheritance of a male is twice that of a female. Most often, with the large number of people, nobody raises his hand. I.e., yeah, that's true. There are rare cases where a person who's well educated on Islam, who may object, but otherwise you get a big, a hall full of people, they accept it. How come it is a myth even among Muslims? We don't study Islam carefully. We don't have the hierarchy of sources going with the revelation, the Quran, then Hadith. Maybe some jurists, they're humans, and a person might be quoting a scholar a few hundred years even after the revelation of the Quran, even quote it first. Say, oh, the fuqaha, the scholars said this, and that. How come somebody dare say it is a myth? But before I answer that question, let me give you the philosophy of inheritance, which is a very sophisticated and amazing system. No human can come up really with that if you study it in detail. And I recall that many years back, not during Shinoda, there was another pope who had more rapport with Muslim, probably understood Islam properly. And he said, our church, of course, doesn't have many laws like in your Sharia. Actually, the Prophet Isa didn't speak much about law. He was talking about the spiritual element that was missing, assuming that the law is there. It has not been abrogated unless specified. So they say, we face some problems with our congregations concerning the question of inheritance. And we know that you guys have a very comprehensive, detailed system for hundreds of years, and that seems to be working out for you. Can we seek your help to help us so that we may adopt some of those as a recognition from a non-fanatic, a very reasonable, loving even Christian head of the Egyptian church. Subhanallah. So this is like a testimony of someone else. That's why I'm saying that if you look at it and analyze, as the scholars looked into, that it is actually based on 4 concepts. 1, nothing to do with the gender in itself. The first concept is the degree of closeness to the deceased. So if a person dies, for example, and he has a son or sons and or daughters, sons and daughters, let's say, at least one son and daughters, his brother does not inherit anything. يحجب, يعني his family take priority because they are closer to him than someone else. Okay? So that's one. A far relative, of course, would have lesser chance, if any, of getting any part of the share. A second one, the scholars say, subhanallah, that generally speaking, there is preference, a little preference or more share for generations that are coming up. An example, a son is a generation that's coming up. A father, again, we say father, a person, and the son, that they're very close, almost about the same. But that's not enough. The father or grandfather, like me, I have to confess, great-grandfather, belong to a generation that is getting ready to check out sooner or later, okay? But then, I'm speaking my sons or daughters for that matter, they are generation that is coming up, growing. What's the significance? I'll give you explicit, down-to-earth examples. They need to get married, okay? So they have greater need. They need to try to buy a house, except in Toronto. Toronto, forget it. You have to be a millionaire to have an apartment. Anyway, but in normal cases, they want to buy a house. So they have financial obligations. Okay? Thirdly, they have lots of responsibilities also as young generation. They get involved in charitable work and so on. So they take preference to the passing generation. Their needs probably at that stage in their lives, unless they're really, really poor, they're, like I said, they're not worried much about the few more years that they live. So that's another, not discrimination, consideration, which are legitimate. Definitely my son is closer to me than my son of my half-uncle. Definitely. Closeness is part of the structure of the family. And if every family does that, then everybody will be taken care of. All right. Thirdly, it is the legal financial responsibility. I limited that to this, even though we talked in general about generations, but financial responsibilities regardless of age or closeness even. People at the same level. For example, father, son. But take our example here, husband, wife. They're partners in marriage. Okay? What Islam says, or what the teaching of Quran and Sunnah say about the obligation of a husband towards his wife. First, no matter how rich his wife may be, whether she's earning additional money on her investment, on her inheritance or not, she is not responsible even for her own food, housing, medication, I would say recreation, because that's part of all her needs. Medical, we said medical before, medical treatments and all of that. These are according to the Sharia of Islam. People think Sharia is a monster. Sharia, as the ulama who understood it, is all rahmah and adl. It's all mercy, all justice. Okay, so she can keep her property. Her property grows, she need not spend a penny on the household, even if she's richer. Now, I'm not saying that she's forbidden, but she's not legally obligated. Her rights are preserved. Okay. If a woman, with the consent of her husband, because Islam gives some responsibility to women also as the shepherd of her household, and of course raising children is not a minor issue. It's a materialistic world. We weigh people by how much they make. And the job of raising children is far greater than any amount of money that you can have. And when your children are lost because the mother doesn't have time for them, in some cases, nothing can compensate. The whole wealth on earth cannot compensate for a child going astray or commit a crime, moral or otherwise. So, what I'm saying that because of this function and duties, she was released from the duty of earning her own money to live, or jointly with her husband earning money so that they can just make it. It is legally the responsibility of the husband. But like I say, if she wants voluntarily to help, nothing can prevent her.